Hello, I'm Pat Dennis, and you've just tuned into Creative Elk's Theatre of Thrills podcast, where today I'm going to talk about two movies, Hell High from 1989 and The Abomination from, God, I don't know, 1986, I believe. The first one is really just your sleaziest goddamn film. It's your classic 80s horror sleaze fest. I mean, in the first 2 minutes, you've already got breasts and a double impaling. So, you know you're in for a good time from the offset. The movie starts out with a little girl who is playing in her cubby house in the swamp, because I guess that's what little girls did back in the 80s. They hung out in cubby houses in a swamp. And then she hears a motorbike coming, so she runs and hides. And on the motorbike are two hooligans who use her cubby house to briefly make out, behead one of her dolls, and then ride away on the motorcycle. Because of the doll beheading, she throws mud on them while they ride past, which causes them to come off the bike and get impaled by bamboo shoots, I guess, that were in the swamp. I didn't know that bamboo grew in swamps, but I guess it does. Then we get a hard cut to 18 years later. Little girl is now a fuddy-duddy teacher, and her classroom is full of similar hooligans. These hooligans are the main characters, which is an interesting choice because they're all just the worst. They're just total bastards. They get really angry at the teacher having expected them to do their schoolwork, and one of them mouths off to her and gets a slap in the face, which, you know, you're not allowed to do these days, but it's 89. I feel like teachers were allowed to do that a bit more by then. But he takes strong umbrage towards this form of discipline. So they decide to go to her house at night, fill bags up with swamp mud, dance around on her ceiling while wearing devil masks, and then throw the mud at her house. Which, you know, it's upsetting to the teacher. She doesn't really enjoy that situation. She freaks out. Then one of her teacher friends comes over and gives her a quaalude, which, you know, it's probably not the best thing to do, and just puts her to bed. Which it's not really the best response to your friend telling you that there were intruders on her house. One of these intruders even broke her window. Her friend just puts her to bed and then leaves her. Like, call the police. You can see the windows actually being broken. And clearly there was an attempt to do a home invasion. But her friend is not a good friend. She just drugs her and leaves. Causing our protagonist to come back and try to take advantage of this sleeping drugged woman. And the teacher wakes up and jumps out the window. And the next rest of the film is basically just the protagonist freaking out that they're going to get in trouble because they've ostensibly killed a woman, their teacher. So they decide to frame her by making it look like the school's quarterback actually did the murder, which is a really stupid plan, because they immediately are like, oh, we can get, you know, an item from the quarterback and plant it here at the crime scene, and the police will think the quarterback did it. And immediately one character who used to be on the football team is like, well, I know where they are. You know, they always go to this diner after a game, so they'll all be there. So he sneaks off to the diner to get, like, something from the quarterback to plant. But if it's common knowledge that that's where the team... that's where the team goes after a game, and the entire football team is there in the diner, then you would think that's a pretty strong alibi. Like, he clearly wasn't there for the murder because he's got an entire football team of witnesses. But regardless, the teacher wasn't actually dead. She wakes up and starts to kill off these characters one by one, which is the best part of the film because the kids are total bastards. So it's good to see them die. And that's really the movie. It's just a sleazy 80s horror which turns sort of into a 80s slasher. each character dies except for one character that looks like Eric Foreman, and he at least goes insane. Weirdly, the quarterback is successfully framed. He gets arrested at the end of the movie, which is sort of presented as a good thing, but like, you know, comparatively, he didn't really do anything wrong for the whole movie. Like, he was a bit of a jerk at the start, but he didn't break into a teacher's house, assault her, kill her, and then try to frame someone for the murder. So, like, compared to the protagonist, he definitely didn't deserve it. But fortunately, I don't think the charges will stick because there is the entire football team of witnesses to say that he was elsewhere. There's not really anything beyond that. It's your very standard 80s sleazy horror, high school horror, where, you know, just like Revenge of the Nerds and whatnot, you have a couple of teenagers doing things that are presented as just being like fun teens doing fun teen stuff, but in like the modern view of the 21st century, like, that's definitely a crime, and these are all bad people. But, you know, at least you get to see them all get murdered. The kills aren't that good. The effects are pretty terrible. The acting, for the most part, is not good. But you got a bit of smut. You got a bit of death. You know, if you're looking for an 80s sleaze fest, it's not the worst one out there. And the synth soundtrack is pretty good. So while I don't recommend it, you know, if you've seen a lot of 80s sleazy horrors and you're looking for another one, this is one. I didn't not enjoy it. Then moving straight along to The Abomination from 1986. Good God. This movie is spectacularly terrible. The entire premise is that a mother coughs up a tumor, which then crawls into her son's mouth, like that scene from David Lynch's Twin Peaks reunion with the frog beetle, and then he coughs it up, and then it slowly grows into this big old tumor monster with teeth and tendrils and whatnot, and he is driven to feed it. And it really is just a cheap rip-off of Little Shop of Horrors, where instead of it being a plant, it's a tumor. You know, he's one by one seducing these people over to be eaten by this monster, which is exactly what happens in Little Shop of Horrors. And when I say cheap ripoff, that's probably unfair because Little Shop of Horrors was like a $0 budget movie, so it's not any more cheap than the Little Shop of Horrors. It's just not as good. The acting is some of the worst acting I've ever seen. The pacing is really bad. They if they shot something, they put it in the movie. You know, every scene goes too long. If someone has to drive a car somewhere, you're gonna basically watch the entire car journey. You're gonna. I made the joke while watching this film that it has more driving scenes than an episode of Dukes of Hazzard. You know, if there's a chase scene, you're gonna see the entire chase scene played out in exhaustive length. The characters will run from the left side of the screen to the right side of the screen, and then we'll get another cut, and the same thing will happen, and then another cut, and the same thing will happen. It will just be played in full. Despite this, if you're watching it with someone, it's very entertaining. Like, if you're looking for a movie to watch while having a few drinks with friends and have a riff, this is a great film for that. Because it's completely absurd, it's completely nonsensical. Some of the things they do just boggles the mind of why a filmmaker would do it. I assume this is a first film, like maybe even a college movie, but for that reason, it's very entertaining as a so bad it's good film. You know, it's not a boring movie. It's just an absurd movie to the absolute extreme. All of the death effects are really bad. You see throats getting cut, and then the camera will cut and will come back to the next shot, and then the throat's all messed up because they obviously didn't have like a fake neck to slice. And a large amount of hands get cut off, and you can see that like they've got a Halloween prop of a severed wrist awkwardly shoved into the sleeve of the shirt, and it's just splurting blood. That's just not the right color. The scenes where they're shoveling like venison into the monster, which is supposed to be dead body, is clearly gathered from like a butcher shop. So that's pretty gross, because like it is clearly like a bucket full of like festy dead meat, and I was just imagining the set must completely reek. The best bit of the film is the monsters. They look surprisingly good for a zero budget movie. Whoever did the creature effects did a great job. They don't look realistic, and they don't look scary, but you can tell someone really put a lot of hard work into it. The only real disappointing thing about the Abomination is the final twist at the end, that the entire thing's just a dream. It's not really a twist so much. It's alluded to at the start of the film as well, because the protagonist is talking to a psychiatrist, but at the end, the psychiatrist is like, it's a dream, you imagined it, you're actually a serial killer. And it's like, it's a dream is a lazy twist. The Wizard of Oz got away with it, but every film that has ever done it subsequently, they don't get that past. It's been done. Stop doing the it's a dream twist. But yeah, The Abomination, I don't recommend you watch it alone and sober, but if you're looking for a great film to put in the background at a party, it's a crowd pleaser. It'll get a lot of laughs. But with that said, I am Pat Dennis. You've been listening to the Creative Elks Theatre of Thrills podcast. I almost forgot what the name of the channel and the podcast was, but there we go. You're listening to Creative Elks Theatre of Thrills podcast. And if you want to hear more of it, tune in next week, where I'll talk about another movie, or two movies, depending if I have enough to say about one to fill in the runtime or not.